Most of us grew up watching Disney classics, and our childhoods were undeniably shaped by their stories. Personally, I was fascinated by the princesses, and just recently, I started researching more about them to create a video similar to one we already have on the channel. And surprise, surprise, I discovered that there are several princess movies that Disney decided to cancel for various reasons, meaning we'll probably never get to see them. So today, I'll tell you about these 8 stories that Disney decided not to bring to life. Plus, with the help of artificial intelligence, we'll imagine what these princesses might have looked like if they had ever made it to the big screen. Rose Red. Back in 2016, Disney announced a live-action movie called Rose Red, centered on Snow White's sister, inspired by the Brothers Grimm tale Snow White and Rose Red. The idea was to integrate Rose Red into the narrative of the 1937 animated classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, placing her in the 3rd act of the story. In this version, after Snow White bites the poisoned apple, Rose Red would join the Seven Dwarfs on an adventure to break the curse and save her sister. However, in May 2021, the project got canceled. Although the specific reasons for its cancellation remain unknown, it's likely that the decision was influenced by the production of another live-action adaptation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, confirmed on May 30th, 2019, and starring Rachel Zegler. Having 2 Snow White-related projects might have created redundancy in Disney's lineup, leading the company to prioritize one over the other. Although Rose Red is part of Snow White's story, a true Disney classic and the very first Disney princess, if the movie had been released between 2016 and 2021, it's likely she would have had a look similar to Elsa and Anna, or even Moana. Penelope and the 12 Months. Penelope and the 12 Months was a Disney project considered back in the 1940s. The plot would have followed Penelope, a servant who bears a striking resemblance to the kingdom's princess. With the help of supernatural beings representing the months of the year, Penelope sets off on a magical quest. Penelope and the 12 Months aim to combine 2 classic children's stories, the Russian tale, The 12 Months, and Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper. The 12 Months tells the story of Marushka, a young girl forced by her cruel stepmother and stepsister to complete impossible tasks in the dead of winter. However, she receives help from 12 magical beings to fulfill her mission. Meanwhile, The Prince and the Pauper, a much more well-known tale, follows the story of Tom Canty, a poor boy, and Prince Edward of England, who switch places due to their uncanny resemblance. Tom experiences life in the royal court, while Edward endures the hardships of poverty. However, Walt Disney felt the story wasn't fully developed and decided to cancel the project. In the 1950s, there was another attempt to revive the idea, but once again, it didn't move forward. Considering that this project would have been released in the 1940s, it's likely that Penelope would have had a look similar to Cinderella, which debuted in 1950. Gigantic. Gigantic was a project by Walt Disney Animation Studios announced in 2015, intended to offer a fresh take on the classic tale Jack and the Beanstalk. Yes, the story where a boy climbs a massive plant into a world of giants. Disney's adaptation was planned to be set in Spain and follow the original story with a slight twist. In the Cloud Kingdom, Jack would befriend Inma, an 11-year-old giant, standing 60 feet tall, who would be our princess, boasting a strong and dominant personality. The project seemed to be making serious progress, as concept art for Gigantic was presented at an expo in 2015, showcasing Jack and Inma. Although the movie was originally scheduled for release in 2020, in October 2017, Disney announced its cancellation. According to official statements, the decision was made due to creative challenges in developing the story. Swan Lake. Back in the 1990s, Disney considered adapting the classic ballet Swan Lake into an animated movie. The story would have closely followed the original plot of the ballet, focusing on Princess Odette, who is transformed into a swan by an evil sorcerer, Rothbart, and her love story with Prince Siegfried. However, during the same period, director Richard Rich was developing a similar adaptation titled The Swan Princess, which was eventually released in 1994. Due to creative conflicts and failure to reach an agreement with Rich, Disney decided to cancel the project. This was unfortunate, as having a Disney version of Swan Lake would have been amazing. Luckily, we at least have the Barbie version. Since Swan Lake would have been released in the 90s, we can assume its visual style would have been similar to that of princesses like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, Jasmine from Aladdin, and Pocahontas. And that's probably how she would have looked. Tam Lin. Tam Lin is a traditional Scottish ballad that tells the story of a young man captured by the Fairy Queen and rescued by his true love, Janet. Janet and Tam Lin fall in love, and she becomes pregnant with his child. Upon discovering he is to be sacrificed as tribute to Hel on Halloween Eve, Janet sets out to save him. Over the years, several attempts have been made to adapt this legend into film, but none have succeeded. In 2003, Roger Allers, known for his work on The Lion King, proposed a Tam Lin adaptation to Disney. However, due to internal conflicts within the company, the project never moved forward. Later, in May 2003, Sony Pictures Animation announced their own adaptation of the story. Despite these plans, no further updates were ever released. If Tam Lin had been a Disney princess from the 2000s, it's likely that she would have resembled Tiana from The Princess and the Frog, and that's probably how she would have looked. Goldilocks. Disney has considered adapting the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears multiple times. One of the earliest attempts dates back to 1922, when Walt Disney directed a short film titled Goldilocks and the Three Bears. This 6-minute animated short tells the classic story of Goldilocks stumbling upon the Three Bears' house, tasting their food, breaking a chair, and sleeping in one of their beds. However, due to the limited distribution and preservation of films from that era, this short is not widely known today. In the 1930s, Disney considered making another short film based on Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Although a short titled The Three Bears was planned, the project was ultimately canceled and never came to fruition. Currently, an animated series called Goldie and Bear airs on Disney Junior since its 2015 premiere. The series continues the story after the classic tale, showing the friendship between Goldilocks and Little Bear as they embark on various adventures in the forest. You can watch full episodes on Disney+. If the 1930s adaptation had been completed, Goldilocks would have probably looked like this. Considering that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released in 1937. Dorothy Gale. Over the years, Disney has tried to add Dorothy Gale to its lineup of princesses, without success. The first attempt occurred after the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, when Walt Disney considered producing an animated film based on The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. However, since the film rights had already been sold, Disney couldn't move forward with the project. 17 years later, in 1954, Disney secured the rights to the remaining 13 books in Baum's Oz series. A live-action film titled The Rainbow Road to Oz was planned, and segments were even presented on the Disneyland TV show. Nevertheless, the project was ultimately abandoned and never completed. Despite this, Disney has managed to adapt the Wizard of Oz story in various ways, though without Dorothy in the plot. This is probably how a Disney version of Dorothy Gale would have looked in 1954, taking inspiration from Princess Aurora in Sleeping Beauty, which was released in 1959. Let me know in the comments what other topics you'd like to see covered on the channel, and remember, if you enjoy this type of video, the best way to support me is by leaving a like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell. See you in the next video.